that we are killing the other animals for our own purposes. Now this one little guy, 8-year-old, had an idea for a game. And he said that we should make a game in which orangutans would experience something that they don't experience in real life. I was like, wow, yeah, that's exactly what I was talking. So tell me more. What would be an example of such a game that the orangutans cannot experience in the real life? And then this little guy continues immediately. He didn't need to think at all. He said that, I think we should make something that they would feel something magical. I think we should make a game in which humans would be their friends. And that was a moment of reflection for me, that are we really that bad that the most utopian imaginary thing that a little guy can imagine is to make a game in which humans and orangutans, two closely related species, could be friends with each other. So my project tries to approach this friendship, how we can create bridges between humans and orangutans through technologies, through gameplay. And I think one of the aspects in this design is to take into account that it comes with a responsibility. It comes with a responsibility as part of friendship from our side. Because of what we are doing in Indonesia, because what we are doing to their living environments, we are responsible for them, and that will be part of the work. I will tell you about the main goals of the project a little bit more detail. The whole idea for making applications for orangutans came with Dr. Willy Smits and Mr. Leo Hulsker in Appenhel Zoo in the Netherlands in 2006, where they started experimenting what kind of things we could give to orangutans to enrich their lives in captivity. A couple of years ago, Dr. Gino Yu and Mr. Wilson Yuen brought this project to Hong Kong Polytechnic University, where I started working on it and trying to figure out what can we actually do to even bring humans and orangutans play together. And from that moment, I have been thinking through the existing knowledge we have on human play and trying to fit that together what we learn from animals as players. Yet another goal I'm mentioning here is to raise awareness through those games that we are creating. So we know that games are good educational tools, they are simulations, it's easy, they are powerful as in education. But it also know that maybe games can lend us some of the hype around them for this important cause. So here is Dr. Willy Smits and Mr. Leo Hulsker. This photo was taken just a couple of weeks ago in Jakarta Zoo in Indonesia. I'm meeting Pretty for the first time here. It was very, very exciting. Now, all of these different goals, today I'm going to focus on enrichment, because enrichment is the part of this plan that fits best with what we understand as play, to consider play and fun in a new context. And from earlier play studies, I have kind of understood that it's safe to assume that play is something that brings us humans and animals on an equal plane. It's something through which we can discuss the similarities and differences between us and some other species. And indeed, there are lots of similarities between us as players. For example, the circumstances or the conditions of starting to play are very similar in humans and orangutans, let's say. Orangutans only play when everything is well, when they are fully fed, when there are no predators, and when everything is safe. Humans play when we don't have to work on bringing food to our tables, or when we don't have to go to school. In captivity, I'm designing for animals in captivity. The situation is a little bit different, because animals in captivity have all the time in the world to play. And that's exactly why we need enrichment. Play is the form of enrichment we can bring to their lives so that they can live happier in captive environments. The biggest difference between humans and animals playing game is that we humans have created a number of technologies to support our play, to make our play more fun, to make it more elaborate and extend the kind of different ways of playing. And it's exactly these technologies that in this project we have tried to bring to animals as well. And in fact, this is nothing new. Already in 1925, a very famous human and animal cognition researcher knew that, or intelligence researcher, suggested that the greatest possibility for captive primates lies in the invention and installation of apparatus which can be used for play or for work. And there have been lots of examples in the past. Particularly with primates, different kinds of touch technologies, other kinds of computers have been used in enrichment. The biggest difference between those and my research is perhaps that I will focus, and I have been focusing on enrichment, on the play and pleasure and enjoyment in particular. Whereas in the earlier cases, these technologies have been means to an end. They have been a way to test something in the animals, to learn something as instruments. Here is one nice image I just want to show quickly of a mandrill playing a speed game in 1970s. He used to be a big bully in his group, a real problem maker, but once this game was introduced, he was a happy mandrill and the peace was restored in the zoo where this game was introduced. So let's return to the fact that we want to know our users. And it's exactly these man-made technologies that has set the biggest challenges in my research. It seems that everything goes wrong with the orangutans when you introduce the technologies that we use ourselves. I will be talking about a rescue center in North Sulawesi in Indonesia. It's called Tasikoki Animal Rescue Center, Wildlife Rescue Center, where two orangutans, Is and Bento, play games. As all orangutans, they have 97% of our DNA. So you could imagine that they are very similar to us. They can touch the screens in the same way as we can. Their physical abilities and vision and so forth are very similar to us. Though from the very beginning of the project, I felt this kind of intimidation or frustration in front of them that was kind of uncomfortable for me. So I felt that there is something different between me and them. And it wasn't until this one moment when I was sitting in a playroom that we created for them, using the touchscreen by myself and trying to show them how to use it, until this night that I realized how this friendship can be created. Because the apes were ready to show me their friendship before I was ready to accept their strangeness. What happened was that I was sitting there, Is was looking at me playing for a long time, and then only suddenly once Bento came to me, and he came with a plastic bag. And I had no idea what to do with this bag until 1 minute later it started to rain. And I knew that these orangutans use these exactly same plastic bags to cover their heads when it rains. And that was the moment when I realized that if these guys are ready to accept my difference and my strangeness, I should go forth and accept theirs. However, even if I saw that I might be ready to create friendships with these animals, with orangutans, it seemed that the technology in itself kept being a problem. Couple of examples here. Input. They were always using the technology with their lips and tongue. All these things that we didn't have the technology to support for. The technology wasn't ready for their kind of input. As I said, they also hit the screen as hard as they could. Actually, Bento did this really nice pirouette in front of the screen, and then with having gained more force, he came all the way down and hit the screen. So these kind of practices were very usual. They didn't know how to use the screen, and the screen wasn't ready for them. Viewing angle as well. They were either too close or too far away. So in order to smell and touch the screen with their mouths, they were sitting very, very close to the screen. At the same time, their attention span seemed to be very short, so they were traveling all around the enclosure, which meant that they also viewed the screen from very far away. So whereas we humans tend to keep away, arm's length away from the screen, they were either too close or too far away from the screen. They also approached the screen from a weird angles, like upside down or hanging around it, or all kinds of things. And then finally, the third thing, they were doing everything else but playing with the screen. I gave them the perfect computer games, but they were playing with cables. And how they were using the screens was that they were sitting on the screen. It was not meant as a bench, but it was for playing. And this was what was going on all the time. So when coming across all these things that I saw that the orangutans were using the screen wrong and that I saw as problems, I started to let go of the frustration as a problem and accepted it as a possibility for my research. And I started to actually focus on those things that they did seemingly wrong. I also had to accept two things, that I myself am a product of my culture, that I have assumptions about the use of these technologies. And at the same time, these technologies are limited. They assume certain kind of use, and they only allow certain kind of use. At the same time, the apes were doing all kinds of exploration. They were using multiple senses. They were using their bodies in much more elaborate ways than any human users I have ever met. So actually those reasons in which I felt that they were different and strange were key elements for understanding who they were as my users. And then it became that my journey of knowing them as users became a journey of knowing myself. And this is also where my cultural studies background kicked in. That I was reminded, and yes, of course, as a researcher, I should be self-aware. I should be aware of all those assumptions that I make that might be problematic for assuming how somebody else is doing something. So I realized that what frustrated me was the difference. The 97% of similar DNA, exactly same DNA, wasn't enough. And I was reminded, by the difference, I was constantly reminded of my legacy as a human being and as a designer coming from a certain background. Earlier I said that the goal of any design is to know your users, and this might well be what sets designers apart from artists. Now I think another thing we should accept and we should go for as designers is to accept that our users, we will never fully know our users, that our users will always, whoever they are, even if they are people around us, they will always remain as strangers for us. And finally, it's said that empathy is hard to create or kind of gather if somebody is very alien to you. It wasn't a problem for Bento to show his friendship and understanding towards me. It wasn't a problem to accept my strangeness, that I was different. So I think as designers, we shouldn't be intimidated what is different and strange in our users. Instead, I think we should take these encounters as possibilities to see the potential for innovation in this very otherness. Thank you very much.